Hello and welcome to Stylish Chats with Creatives. Today on the podcast, I'm chatting to Jo Higgs. Jo is a Hertfordshire-based graphic designer who specialises in branding design. Hello.
Hi.
Lovely to have you on.
Oh, thank you very much, Charlotte. It's really lovely to be on.
We were just having a little preamble before I press record about your print shop, about how you're an art worker as well. It seems that you've got like a lot of strings to your bow.
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting because I think in the recent years or the recent year, I've tried to niche down a little bit because I really enjoy the logo and branding work. It's like the most creative of all the work, but I still do bits of everything for different people. So jack of all.
I think that's us creatives though, down to a T. Like we were just saying again before we press record, sometimes you say yes to a job and then go, I've actually got to figure that out now, because you have to try it and you're like, oh, okay, well, I know most of it, but there's maybe like a little nuance that I'm not sure of, so I've got to maybe ask a couple of peers, see if they can help, and get on YouTube, get on Google.
Yeah and I think with because I use Adobe software, and there's probably like 20 different ways of doing the same thing anyway, and so you are always learning quicker ways to do things, and like different key commands and different things, and you think, why didn't I know this sooner? Like this would have saved me hours in the past, and stuff like that. So yeah, you definitely learn. The more you do of something, you learn what you like doing, don't you? That's how you can sort of break it down a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I've definitely niched out the last 3 years maybe, and just kind of, okay, this is what I really enjoy, and you kind of hone in on it, don't you? And then all of a sudden people ring you because you're known for something that you didn't even realise you were known for.
Yeah, well, I have actually been quite deliberate, based on like advice from other like freelancers of trying to put out there what I want to attract, type thing. So just keep talking about those things all the time. So in this case, branding or logos. So I say branding or logos. Obviously, logos are part of branding, but sometimes I'll just do like logos and colours for people, and other times I'll do a wider sort of branding package. So that's why I was saying them kind of separately, even though they're sort of intertwined. But yeah.
So how do you design a branding package for someone? Do they say to you, right, I like pink and leopard print and XYZ? Do you know what I mean? And do they kind of say like that, or are they a bit more fluffy with it? Or
yeah, so so when I start work for somebody, we obviously have an initial chat, and to be honest, most of the people that I do that kind of work for, they are solo businesses generally, or they've got a very small team and they are in charge, and it's basic to I'm generally dealing with one person, I do have a chat with them, but I do always give them a carefully crafted questionnaire. And there's lots of things they need to think about, like their ideal clients and things like that, that are really, really important, that they actually go through that process. Because some people come to me and they know they've got a really clear idea who they're trying to attract, how it needs to look in terms of friendly or professional or both, or that kind of stuff. So some people have got a really clear idea, but some people have never really properly broken that stuff down. So it's really important that they do. So I do say like, design isn't magic, right? So I need to know as much as I can about your business, and then we're going to really get much better results. But because what's really nice is because they are mainly people like who run a business by themselves. I also really like to bring them into it. So what you were saying with like the colours, obviously different colours mean different things generally and give a different feel. But unless you have an industry where a colour is going to be quite offensive for some reason, you can still incorporate colours that you like. So I kind of get people to, at the beginning, give me like a little Pinterest board of things they like, and I get a feel for them. So obviously I'm looking at the industry they work in, and I'm looking at designing so that it fits with that market and it attracts clients for that market. But I also want to bring a bit of them into it as well. And I'm incredibly visual, so you can write things down to the cows come home, but if I can see it, I'm there, it makes sense.
Yeah.
So that's where we start. And then it's funny, I had an email today actually from a client, and a lot of people, when you send off the initial concepts, especially for like logos, which is the place I always start, because that kind of dictates the style of everything else, they're sort of apologizing because they're saying, oh, this isn't, I quite like it a little bit more. And I think it actually would be magic to completely make it perfect. So it's definitely a collaboration, because you come up with the ideas and I always supply a document that explains and talks that through. So I don't just send through some logos and say, what do you like? I actually explain, well, this is why I've picked this type of font. This is why I've gone for these colours. This is why I've added this detail, and everything is explained so they can understand where I'm coming from. And again, most of the ideas obviously have a connection of something I've picked up in something they've said. And it might not actually be linked to their business directly, or it may be very linked to their business. It just depends. Some people have a business name that is quite visual, like if you had a place that was called, I don't know, apples and bananas or something, you can see straight away, like, you're going to try and probably incorporate something to do with fruit. But if it's just somebody's name, there is no visual attached to that. There's no like instant visual in someone's mind. So you've got to make the logo stand out and be interesting without having that. So I kind of, there's a process that again, over time, I've learned, if I drop any of these elements, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
I have to go through the whole process. And then we go backwards and forwards. And normally, sometimes there'll be like two concepts, we kind of merge them a bit. Or I like this from one and I like that from, can I see it like this? But, touch wood, we get there quite quickly normally. But there is definitely a collaboration. It has to be, I'm not waving a wand and just... and sometimes people think they want something, so when you actually show them, they go, oh no, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So sometimes people go, I really want this, and I'll say, well, this might work better. And, no, I really want this. So I'll show them both, and then they can go, oh yeah. Not I'm saying I'm always right, but there is like an element of, I do kind of know what works. So
yeah. And I think that's it. Sometimes I'm a visual person as well, and sometimes I need to see it to understand why it doesn't look right. And so sometimes if a photographer will be like, no, this needs to move here, or I'm like, just do me a shot and then I'll understand why it doesn't sit there. Otherwise I'll do it again, like say do different product but put something in the same size in the same place and go, that doesn't work. So I'm learning the lesson quicker. But it's funny, isn't it, when you get people who aren't visual asking for stuff, and that must be quite, like you say, a little bit difficult if you hadn't got that process in straight away. I think you definitely need to hone down so that the person knows who they're aiming for, and that they give you lots of information that you can then keep like referring back to. Well, you wanted it to look professional but friendly, so we've gone with the lowercase, but we're using this type of font, and you're explaining all those elements, and then they can see that you haven't just got off the peg logo that you did 6 months ago and gone, there you go. So I think it is. That's what I really like about it, and it's obviously a lot quicker when you're dealing with one person. We sort of spoke about dealing with bigger companies, and I do that, and I have done that in the past. But I do think that there's something really nice about that one-to-one connection
with a client in that way, where they can just make the decisions and they don't have to go back and sort of sell it to someone else.
Yeah, they're not jumping through like loads of like hoops to for you to just sit there and twiddle your thumbs for a week, like waiting for someone else. Yeah, that's it. So have you worked both sides, agency and client side?
Yeah, so years ago I worked it was quite a small agency, but I worked in an agency in London. And it had quite a big high street presence. So it was kind of like it was a little bit of a sort of mishmash of all sorts of things. It had a print shop downstairs. It's like my proper first graphic design job. And it had a print shop downstairs, and which was really great actually from a learning perspective as a graphic designer, because I know the world's quite different now, and a lot of stuff is digital, and some designers are purely digital nowadays. But back in the day, we used to print things on paper. No, but I think that like just understanding that process, like actually seeing a print press actually work and that kind of stuff was really great. Yeah, and it was sort of in West London, so it was quite exciting. And we'd spot celebrities every now and then.
Oh.
But they didn't come into the shop. They would just like look out the window.
Can you name a celebrity that you were like, oh,
I was Law.
Really?
Like, I think I'm sure it was him outside. And then I'd see like, I do remember, this is a bit random. This is a bit of a silly story, but I remember walking along the high street once and this guy was coming towards me and I just felt like a bit, I can't really explain it other than I felt a bit scared. And I just thought, oh, like, who's that? Like I recognized him, but I don't really know why I recognized him. And it all happened really fast because I was walking one way, he was walking another. And then as he'd gone past me, I was like laughing to myself because he was an actor. I actually don't know his name. I should find that out if I'm going to tell the story. But there was a show where they used to have Being Human. It was a werewolf and a vampire and something else. They all lived together.
Yeah.
A ghost.
Yeah.
They all lived together. But it was really like down to earth kind of English.
Yeah.
Sort of, you know. And he was like this really bad vampire. He was like a really evil vampire character. And I just remember being like, oh, and then being like, oh, you know, like as I walk past. So stupid. But it was just like, because you're just not used to, like, I mean, I grew up in a little village in Norfolk. So, you know, like seeing celebrities on the street was like ridiculous. So, yeah.
That's funny.
But so it was quite good fun.
That's really funny that you just kind of imagined him as the vampire rather than just a normal person.
It was just like part of my brain was like, whoa, he's dangerous.
Yeah, just like straight away clicked on. So before your agency job, did you go to uni to get into graphic design, or what's your kind of journey into it?
Yeah, so I have quite a meandering journey into it. So I was always like, so when I was a kid, I was always like, I don't know if arty is the right word, but I liked creative stuff. And I used to make lots of things, and I did art at school. And I'd painted a few like murals. I think we did one in like our local swimming pool and different things. So I always wanted to do something creative. I know I wanted to be a fashion designer, which if you look at what I'm wearing today is a bit of a joke. But at the time, I really did want to be a fashion designer when I was, I don't know, when I started high school sort of thing. And then I learned about the real world, and that was probably not going to happen for me. But when I left school, it's quite funny actually, because I didn't see, nearly all of my friends just did like A-levels in the local sixth form. And I actually went to art college, which was in Norwich, which was it's I think they've changed the name, Norwich School of Art, I think it's called now. It's a pretty good art school, but it was weird because up until that year, we were the first year to do like a GMVQ, which was like instead of our A-levels. And up until then, they'd only ever done foundation and degree courses. So they had these like, and I went into this course and there was probably like 2 or 3 of us, maybe a couple more, I don't remember, who came from school, and the others had done A-levels, and they were doing an extra year to get more art to then do a foundation before they even did their degree.
Holy shit.
So I came out, I know, It was just insane. And I came out fresh out of school, like Bambi, and I was just like, what was going on? I mean, it was, and we were getting the bus up to Norwich, and not only that, but they squeezed it into 1 year. So it was full time. So we were there like 9 to 5 doing art, like in Norwich. It was weird, yeah. So, but kind of, that's me. That is me all over. Like, yeah, this course is only a year. Let's do that. This is quicker. I think I have a slight impatience issue.
You and me both.
So I actually, I actually came out of. I came out of that obviously with the equivalent of A levels, and then at that point I was just like, I'm not going to like do any other education now. I just like need to get a job and have some independence and all the rest of it. So yeah, I learned to drive, and I did lots of really boring and rubbish jobs, as you do when you're that age. But then I was like, yeah, I don't just want to do this forever. So I actually went traveling for a year with a boyfriend that I had at the time to Australia. Which is another one that I look back and I think, God, I sound so old when I say this. It was so different because I used to literally write letters to my mum and dad. I would write letters.
Wow.
And we would find an internet cafe every like 2 weeks or something, and I'd be able to send an email.
That sounds amazing. Just take me back to those days.
Yeah. I mean, it in some respects, like it really is, but in other respects, you think, what, my poor parents, they must have been so like, they didn't know I wouldn't have even known where I was most of the time. I mean, in fairness, I was with someone, so it wasn't like I was completely on my own. And although I knew a lot of people who obviously did go traveling on their own at that time. But yeah, so anyway, so I did that, and it kind of opened up my eyes a lot I'd lived in Norfolk from the age of about 7, and Norfolk is like, I suppose it's, especially then, I mean, we're talking like the sort of, I think I went in 2001, so it was like a long time ago, and the world was like everything was different to what it is now. Now the world is very small, but in those days, you know, it was like you were going to the moon. You were going to Australia for a year, you were going to the moon as well, you know, like... And so before I came back, I was like, I don't just want to go back and get a job. So I applied for a HND. So it's actually like not quite a degree, but you do graduate. Again, 2 years instead of 3, just thinking about all that time I'm saving. And actually, it's interesting because that was in Norwich. And it was, I think at the time it was quite cutting edge. I think actually it was a really good course, and we did animation and video stuff as well as like graphic design, film. We did a lot of really cool stuff. And I just worked at the local hospital part-time, and I did the course. And that was when I graduated from that, I thought, I'll get a job doing like graphic design or something. But it was in Norwich, and it was in a recession, and it really wasn't going to happen. So that was a bit sad. So I think at that point, that is what I wanted to do. But the jobs were few and far between. And I had a couple of, one of those heartbreak stories where you get down to the last 2 for a magazine or something, and it doesn't happen.
Yeah. And
I just couldn't seem to get any momentum, I don't think, at that time. But I think a big part of it was my location, and the fact that there were less jobs in that industry.
Yeah.
And I also didn't really I wasn't well connected or anything like that. And to do a degree, a full degree, they wanted you to do another 2 years.
Oof.
I know. So again, that wasn't happening.
No. I remember, so I did a BTEC national diploma at Isle College in Wisbech. So this is going back, 2005, 2006, maybe. I don't know. Maybe that long ago. Oh God, yeah, it probably was that long ago.
I don't think
no. Well, the grey hairs show enough of that age. And I'm sure there was somebody doing a HND. I'm sure that college offered HNDs as well. And then because they couldn't offer, there was a time I feel like they couldn't offer degrees, but they offered that. And then there was a bolt on, like you're saying, like a 2-year bolt on that then got you a degree. So you'd be in school until you're like 20.
Yeah. So I think it was really odd because I remember at the time I was allowed to then go to the Norwich School of Art if I wanted to and do 1 year. And the only course that would let me do that, having a HND in multimedia design, was a fine art degree.
How odd.
So I would have come out, I would have done a year in a fine art setting and I would have come out with a fine art degree. But that was, I mean, I don't really know. I mean, I think potentially people that do fine art, they actually do have more of a spectrum of what they're allowed to kind of do. I think it's quite diverse now, but I think then it would have been very much wafting around in a caftan and painting things, which actually was nothing like what I'd just done. So I didn't do that. And also financially, like, again, it's like how much money you've got, not just where you live, but like, you know, by that stage I was about 23 or something, and I was ready to, like, you know, move out, and I'd been away, lived away, had to come home and stay with my parents while I was studying, and then I was like ready to move on, you know, move on to the next thing. So I did bits and pieces for people, but nothing, I didn't get like any concrete work in design. And then I ended up I ended up becoming like a medical rep because I had a friend who was a medical rep and she had a company car and she got paid quite nicely. And I was like, oh, that sounds nice. Because I do actually think that until I looked back, you know, like when you're doing this kind of thing, when you're doing a podcast or something, you do look back at what you've done, don't you? And you start actually looking at it you don't normally do that. But one of the things I have noticed is I'm not a person that's ever really just sat at a desk. Do you know what I mean? It's not it. Obviously I do because I design, but I've always done it in a very sort of, I've always had jobs where I get up and move around a lot. So, or I'm doing different things. So I was a medical rep for a few years. And then I moved to London with my now husband, who was trying to get a job in London, and I could transfer my job. And that was when I decided, right, if I'm going to be living in London, I'm going to try and be a graphic designer, basically. Because if I can do it anywhere, I'm going to be able to do it here. And so I was probably maybe like, I don't know, 26, 27, maybe even 28. Yeah. Before I actually got employed as a graphic designer.
Yeah, it just goes to show that, like, our journeys aren't always that linear. And actually sometimes you go off and, like, it sounds incredible that you went to Australia. That's absolutely insane, especially back in the day when there just internet cafes, there wasn't internet all the time. And like that experience then would have given you skills that you probably still using today, and your medical rep like job would have still given you skills, but it has all gotten you to the point that you always wanted to be. But it's not, I think what I'm trying to say is not everybody's life script, for want of a better word, is the same. And actually you can still have a career and change it no matter what age you are. You don't have to be 21 to decide what you're going to do. And I think we put so much pressure on like teenagers to go, right, you're going to college next year and you're 16 and you've got to decide what you're going to do because you're going to do that for the rest of your life. And like, that's a bit intimidating, you know, like I certainly have not done an awful lot with my fine art BTEC national diploma, I tell you, because I still can't draw any hands and still can't draw any bloody feet. So, but I think like you, I had a really mixed media class, and like there's still other things like composition and stuff that I'm still using today. But I wouldn't have said that going to uni would have made, I don't feel like I would have gathered any more knowledge having gone to uni. I think I probably would have been drunk and then painting and farting about, really, to be honest.
Yeah.
And at what point do you kind of go, well, because I looked at Norwich Art School as well.
Did you?
Yeah,
It's well known,
Yeah,
isn't it?
really well known, especially down in East Anglia. Between that and I think the Cambridge. I'm not going to call it School of Art, but it was something like that. That used to be like a different part, um, not the academic side. And I just said to mum and dad, I was like, none of this is what I want to do. Like,
Yeah.
so it didn't seem much point. But much like you, it took me probably another, oh God, 6 years probably. I was probably like 20, try to think when I met my husband. So yeah, I'd have been 21, 22, finally getting
Yeah.
into styling work, which I didn't even know I wanted to do. And then here I am all those years later, still doing it.
Yeah, I think it's funny. I think for me, I feel like it was more like I couldn't do what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And I think that's quite an interesting, I think that does kind of, you grow as well from that.
Yeah.
Like you kind of, I mean, you can get a bit like down and jaded and stuff, but when I think about it, like, I suppose, I mean, to say I'm a risk taker makes me sound like an idiot, but I suppose there is an element of actually I am willing to. I had a good job, I had a company car. I remember sitting down with I remember sitting down with my boss and saying, "So I'm leaving," and she said, "Oh, are you?" I think she said, "Are you pregnant?" Which
Oh,
was a little bit rude because
wow.
I wasn't. but anyway, she said, "Oh, where are you going to go?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to." I just feel like I need to do this thing, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, so you haven't got a job? And she looked at me like I was literally insane. And she just couldn't understand it. Like there was nothing about what I was saying that would ever enter her head. There was never, in no way she would ever take that risk.
Yeah.
And I kind of thought to myself, look, absolute worst case scenario, I could get another repping job. Like it's not, I've got some experience behind me and everything. But actually, when I first I wasn't actually I was a medical rep, as in I was a representative of the company, but I used to train and do audits. And I really liked that. But the only way to progress was to become an actual rep selling. And that just wasn't like what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I just spent all day on my own in the car. And then I was living in London and I had no friends because I just moved to London. So I wasn't making any friends. So it was all kind of quite isolating and lonely. So to me, it wasn't a big risk. To me, it was like an exciting big change that might, come off really well. Yeah. So I think sometimes I think you're absolutely right. I think you don't really know what you want when you're younger because you haven't really experienced life,
No.
and you have to actually experience some life. But pretty much everything I did before I did graphic design was like a customer facing job. So I think that that's something that, like communication, I think that's really key. If you're going to freelance or do your own business, you need to be good at communicating, or it's not going to work very well for very long.
Yeah, that's completely it. And I think it's one of the things I kind of like bang on about. You kind of have to put your like business communication head on. You can't tell a client to fuck off, but like there's a way of like saying, I'm not happy about this in a different manner. And
Yeah.
that also takes time and practice. But like you say, if you've got a bit of like life experience, you can kind of go, right, okay, I know if I get really angry, there's going to go down really bad. But actually, if I express what I'm feeling and get it out properly and communicate properly, we're all going to end up happier out of it. And
Yeah.
that definitely comes from being customer facing. Like I had some awful customers when I was working in a fashion retailer when I was late teen, early 20s. And whew, some of those prep you for like, you think, well, nobody can be worse than
Not going to be that bad.
person. Yeah. Like nothing can be that bad.
Yeah, and I think when anywhere I've ever worked, I've been praised for my communication skills. I've been praised for how I dealt with clients, depending on obviously what the job was. And I had all different jobs, like over my life before I could do the design, and even dealing with colleagues and dealing with like different things. Which, yeah, for me, obviously now I don't have any colleagues, so I just I just agree with myself on everything. Yeah, but with clients and stuff. And also what's interesting, I think, as well, is with age and like where you are in your life and how much time. Like, I'm quite time poor. I only have so much time I can spend on things. Whereas before I may write War and Peace to somebody, who's sent me an inquiry. Now I'm like, right, I work in school hours. This is how much I charge an hour. If that works for you, then great. Let me know what you want. It's a lot more. And actually, I think in some respects, when you're too eager, people think you're a bit desperate, or I don't know. People maybe just think, or if you can see them too soon, or if you can do the work too quickly. I mean, it's good to be. It's good to be able to help people with what they actually need. And part of freelancing, as you know, is like normally short notice on things.
Yeah.
And normally if it's something small, that's fine. I can normally squeeze things in. But I think just having that confidence from the off to just lay your cards on the table. Because when I first, so I had a break with the children. So I worked in London, and then I was pregnant with my eldest and we moved to Hertfordshire, and I just couldn't commute back in and make it work financially. So I did contracting work, and that was okay, but it was quite hard to make that work. And then I had my second child, and I just found that financially it didn't make sense, because unless I had guaranteed work, I couldn't be paying out. And I didn't want to get a part-time, there aren't many part-time graphic design jobs out there.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do full-time, because I did want to have some time with the children. And I just couldn't make it work. So I didn't work for a couple of years. And then when I tried to get back into it, there's that whole confidence thing you've got to get over. And I think at first I just thought, well, I can't be a graphic designer again. And it was just like, I'll have to do something else. And I always did creative things. I did an art club and worked at a pottery shop and things like that. But I just kind of felt like it's not going to happen for me. But I think weirdly, COVID kind of changed that, because all of a sudden everyone worked from home.
Yeah.
Everyone worked from home, and the world didn't stop, and businesses didn't shut down because everyone decided they weren't going to work. Everything carried on. And then there was this whole new landscape of people working from home. Whereas before, if you said, I want to have a couple of days working from home, and, people would just laugh at you. They wouldn't give you a job like that.
Yeah.
So that, as well as the fact that social media's exploded, and now I pretty much market myself on social media,
Yeah.
So in fairness, it is mainly word of mouth still. But I think just having that kind of, people have said to me that they feel like they know me before they meet me and stuff like that. And I think you are able to kind of show a bit of yourself, even if someone hasn't met you. So they might live miles away, but they get a feel for who you are.
Yeah, I think that's really important in our marketing now, is that it's really funny you should say that, actually, because I put a picture up on my work Instagram. So I kind of mix it between there's some bits of work, there's a little bit of me, there's a little bit of podcast stuff. And this one was a picture of me that my husband took that was quite nice. 1 out of 30 that was nice. And then then my mum had sent me a picture of me with this god awful haircut that was actually a passport picture.
Oh, I think I saw that on your Instagram.
Oh my God, right. So that post...
Does it say "ew" or something?
Yeah. So that post, I was just oh, fuck it, I'm just going to put it out because it's hilarious. This picture my mum sent me is hilarious. I think I'm in an ETAM top or something as well. And so much gel in my hair, so much gel. It was horrendous. And not a pixie crop, I don't even know what it was, a bit like a Lego head kind of haircut. And then that had so much traction. Yeah, I think the post before, a podcast post or a work post, had minimal traction. And I was I just don't understand. Obviously, it's just a funny picture and people are this is a funny picture. But I was I just cannot get my head around it. But I think it's because people want to see a part of you, and they want to know that you're your bit of your personality before they book you as well, because they want to know that you gel with their team, or that you're not going to
Yeah.
cause problems or whatever, and that you're just going to work well, and a sprinkle in a bit of humor or bad
Yeah.
haircuts in my case. Some people seem to like it. Might have to make it a weekly thing. I'm sure there's plenty of haircuts that are awful. But I do think social media has changed a lot, like an awful lot for us freelancers, for our marketing, like, because it's free,
Yeah.
it's quick and easy for people to understand, and you can get your point across quite easily. And like, because it definitely
Yeah.
wasn't a thing when I was when I first started out. Like, I had to send what my dad would call hit and hope emails, where you just like, hi, I'm amazing,
Yeah.
hair flick, book me.
Bye.
And like now it's like same as you, it's like a lot of it's word of mouth, or clients will
Yeah.
see my Instagram and go, oh yeah, we've got a similar product, I know she can style that. Like, it's funny, isn't it? And you're so right as well, it's changed so much since COVID.
Yeah. I mean, I actually set up a little business hiring out vintage crockery, because I had this, it's random, isn't it? But I had vintage crockery that I had bought over a few years, and I'd always thought, oh, I should rent that out. Like, it's so easy.
Yeah.
Like everything, I'll just rent that out. That'd be an easy thing to do. Anyway, and then basically I kind of decided this just before we went into COVID, and but it was actually really lovely, because during COVID I used to rent it out, like in enough stuff for like a family. So if they had like a special afternoon, if they had a special birthday or something, I provided them with like all this beautiful crockery for an afternoon tea or something.
Oh,
And there wasn't much to do in lockdown, so it was quite popular. But I learned about Instagram. I wasn't even on Instagram, and I learned about Instagram through that. I mean, I'm old, so I'm obviously on Facebook, but I wasn't on Instagram at all. And although I didn't, I mean, when we came out of lockdown, I did get involved in a few like styled shoots and things, which I loved, and I loved marketing it, but I didn't actually love packing it and washing it and doing all the stuff with it,
yeah.
which I'm sure you have to do, all that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So although I didn't continue that business, it was a step into running my own thing and learning about social media as a tool to promote yourself. And so actually, that's when I was like, and my son was like starting school, and I was like, right, I'm going to have this time now. So let's like try it. But my mistake, and something I'd like advise everyone not to do, is I guess I was kind of hiding, because I was not ashamed, but I hadn't been doing graphic design. I was a mum, and I had kids that I was working around school hours, and I thought, no one's gonna, if I tell the truth about this terrible person that I am, no one's gonna want to like use me. And what I've actually learned is this, like, the opposite is true, because there's so many women out there who have been in the same situation, where they have basically had children and not been able to, or not been accepted back into the workplace in any kind of flexible capacity at all. And they've created their own ecosystem. Basically, we're all out there doing our own thing. And so there is a huge amount of people, and actually predominantly, and it isn't all of my clients, but predominantly my clients are women who are running their own businesses and have had the same kind of situation, often mums, But yeah, so I think it's kind of amazing, because it's like a revolution almost,
Yeah.
a quiet revolution that's just ticking along in the background that the boys aren't looking at. Not just the boys, but anyone who's a primary carer. I think that's
Yeah.
the fair thing to say. So it's like anyone, you don't have to be a woman, but it's just that majority of people are. But and it's been amazing. But I do think you have to have several things going on. So you need to look professional. You need to have your own website, and your Instagram's lovely for like what's the latest thing that person's doing. And getting your face, because that's the other thing. I never put my face. I would just put pictures of my work. Everyone just wants to see my work, and no, they just want to see your face, like literally.
Yeah.
And I have to give credit to. I'm in a group there's a lovely lady called Becky, Be Heard Social, and she runs a group, and basically she is a genius at social media. So she sends through, and it's that thing of reminding you to sell, but like how you sell and how often you sell, and then what's for engagement, what's for sale. You know, there's a lot to it.
Yeah.
It's not just like whacking out what you feel like.
Yeah.
There is like a way to do it well. But even Facebook, like people scoff at Facebook, but it's really easy to recommend someone on Facebook.
Yeah.
It's really hard to recommend someone on Instagram.
Yeah.
So you've got to find that handle, and it's really confusing. And whereas Facebook has groups, and you can just like tag that person into, oh, does anyone know of a florist that's really good? Yeah, sure, these people straight away.
Yeah.
You know, on a mummies group or on a local business group or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So actually, I think there is a huge part of society that are still on Facebook, and especially, maybe not like young people, but I'm sure there are other things. I don't know. I feel like, are you on TikTok and all that stuff?
So
I mean, what else is there? I don't know.
I'm gently on TikTok. So I've posted like the odd thing on there, and then I posted like my reels from the podcast on there. So I was like, okay. And then I've had some of the reels have had like 1,500 views. Then some have had 45. So I cannot get my fucking head around it. But then I lose time on TikTok because generally there's quite a lot of people out there who are just normal people. Just they're really funny or they're doing something stupid. It's a bit like watching what was that TV show in the like 90s where they were showing like bloopers from people's home videos. I can't remember what it was called.
Oh yeah, you used to get £250.
Yeah, and that was like mint. Get 250 quid check, yes please.
Can you imagine?
Oh, I can't remember what it was called, but
not You've Been
yeah,
Framed.
You've Been Framed.
Yeah,
and the guy had a hook hand, didn't he, years ago? And I can't remember his name. So there's people like doing stupid shit, and then I end up like losing like 3 hours on there. So I'm gently on it. I wouldn't say, a couple of my friends are on it and they're kind of like trying to sell their work, but then I don't know whether it's a bit too peer-to-peer rather than peer-to-client, if that makes sense. LinkedIn is a funny old beast that I'm still trying to get my head around. I am finding that the more personality you put in, the better you get back out of it. Instagram is one of my main ones, but again, that maybe is a bit peer-to-peer. It's maybe not, get the odd client from there. And Facebook, I kind of had to come off Facebook a little bit because during COVID, my she doesn't listen, but my grandma was reposting some questionable things, and I was like, oh, I think maybe it's time for me to come off a little bit. Although I have to say it is great for the local community groups we've got, like the selling groups and stuff like that. Fantastic. So I do think that community side is definitely there with it. Not so much on my hometown community page. That is rough. You've got to go in with an impenetrable armor to get anywhere on that one. That is horrendous. You know where I went to college, so I'm from North Cambridgeshire, so like there's parts of North Cambridgeshire that are a little bit, scruffy.
Scruffy.
Just oof. That is a wild ride, that community page. But I do think social media is one of those things that you kind of got to lean into a little bit and just kind of see where you land with it and just try lots of different things. And like I was trying for a little bit on LinkedIn, just I'd put like, oh, it's my Friday to-do list, hop in like and just, chat shit basically. But I can't say whether I've had any more bookings from it. I don't know, not really, but if you don't try it, people don't know you're not there. People aren't aware you're there, so it's one of those balancing acts, isn't it?
Yeah, it is interesting because I think obviously you're always told these things, aren't you? Like, if your continuity is key and all that kind of stuff. So I actually have only been doing it properly 3 times a week posting, like this year, so 6 months. But I've just had the busiest 3 months that I've had.
That's great.
So yeah, so, and I mean, I did some work. I mean, there's a combination. I've started doing some in-person networking. Obviously I'm getting a bit of momentum where people are recommending me who I've done work for, and then that starts to spread.
Yeah.
And also I did some work last year on my website and trying to improve like SEO type things and make it look a bit better. So there's obviously, it's not the only thing that I've done, but there's definitely an obvious correlation. And I think for me, I don't go on social media personally. So I was never on social media. I mean, I was on Facebook because everyone was, but I'd never post. I probably haven't posted on my personal Facebook for like 2 years or something. I don't know when I last did. And I almost see it's not a persona as in I'm pretending to be someone else, but it is my work. So I'll make reference to my children, for example, but I don't put pictures of them. Occasionally they might appear in a photo, like slightly obscured or something, but they're not, it's very much for work.
Yeah.
And I see it as part of my work. So that's interesting. But it is addictive, even in that respect, because you think, oh, it's, the dopamine hit. Oh, how many likes has that had? Or has anyone commented on that? Or, it is strange, even though it's not, even though I kind of am slightly removed from it in that way.
It's interesting you mention it as work. So I've only just recently started to view social media as work since I made the decision to get a personal phone. And the personal phone this blew my dad's mind. It doesn't have any banking on, doesn't have any email, any social media. It is literally like an old school burner phone, and people can text me or call me on it, and that's literally it. And there's only maybe 15 people that have that number, and then the other number gets turned off and all my social media's off, because I was sat scrolling, especially if my husband was at work. I'd just be sat scrolling, and then I'd be like, oh, that person's doing that. Oh, I wish I was doing that. Forgetting that I've done some pretty awesome stuff, not to toot my own horn, but, and you kind of get absorbed in this kind of comparison thing. And actually, you're so right with like not having your kids on social media. Like, people don't need to know every single ounce of what goes on in your life. However, I feel like when social media, Facebook became a thing when my friends were at uni, and you were only allowed on it because your uni was on it or something. I can't remember the full. So then that's how it started. So we weren't really on it all the time. And now it's like this compulsion to put stuff on all the time. And actually, people don't need to know that. Yes, it's great to pull out old school passport pictures of dodgy haircuts, but they don't need to know what I've eaten for dinner and like, when I last farted. Which I feel like Facebook got to that point, and so did Instagram for a little bit. But it is interesting.
Dinners, lots of dinners.
Yeah, lots of dinners with a really weird vignette on as well. But I think now I see it as a tool for work, even though I have a personal one. The dog's got one because it's just easier to show people images of the dog on there. I think seeing it as work just separates it, and then it's like, oh, okay, I don't need to be on this all the time. And now I catch myself during the day and I'm like, oh, why am I scrolling on that? Like, but the same as you, I've only really been posting consistently for the past 10 months maybe. And you definitely see a drive in connections, and definitely doing the podcast, I've got more connections as well from people, but it's a tool, and it is so addictive. And like, I see, and I spoke to a couple of friends who've got older kids, and they're like, well, the other kids have got phones, and like our kids are asking for phones, and they're like 11. Like,
there's a bit of a revolution, I think, that's literally happening right now against, children having phones and trying to like pull back, because I think there's been a generation that we've just had that's like, obviously for like us when we grew up kind of without it all, and then but as adults had the benefit of it all. Whereas actually growing up with it is just horrendous. Like, and there's definitely some advice that you shouldn't really have social media till you're 16, and even having a phone that has any like WhatsApp or anything like that, they say. And it's really difficult because obviously at the moment we're in the middle. So my eldest is like, she's about to go into year 6, and there are plenty of kids in her class with a phone, and she's got no interest in it at the moment. But obviously when she gets to high school, and there's that argument of like they're going to be on their own and walking on their own and all of that kind of stuff, like we did.
Yeah.
But I think it's that thing of like just that if I'm like in my 40s and I can't put the phone down because I just want to keep checking it, you know, what is my like 11-year-old going to be like with it? It's just like, so anyway, I think it's kind of starting, and it's that thing of not being judgmental, and it's the thing of like us and them, and I think it's quite difficult at the moment because it's just starting, and so it's not like all the people that have given a phone are like bad people. It's just that, like you say, if everyone else has got a phone, you know, you don't want your child to be the only child that doesn't have the phone, because then that's a different kind of punishment that they're having. There's a different kind of problem that they've got, and they're outcasts and everything. So you need enough people so that there's groups, you know, like, we're the group where our parents don't, you're the group where their parents do, you know, like it's, you need a little bit of a gang. But
I think it's difficult as well. Like I flicked on TikTok maybe like 6 months ago. It might have even been Instagram, and all of a sudden there's like, I'm fully aware there's wars going on, and all of a sudden there was like in-depth things just flung on Instagram or on social media, and like I'm like mid to late 30s. Oh, that's horrible to admit. And even
so young.
And even I don't want.
I'll swap if you want.
Happily, this body is creaking way too early. But I was on it and I thought, oh, it's making me feel horrible. And so, and I thought to myself, what would I have felt at 13? Looking at that, you know, because you have no control over what comes up on your algorithm, and that it's scary. You know, there's stuff that they don't need to know about at that age, or it needs to be a gentler version of the truth. It's very difficult, and I think you're right. Like there needs to be like a little gang who don't, little gang that do, and then, you know, over time. I
mean, if the schools, the easiest thing is that they ban it at least at school, and things like that. There are things that can be done, but kind of on a wider level, and then things change. But I think there is thankfully a bit of a backlash on it, or people are just starting to realise what damage it does. So we'll see how that plays out. I'll come back and let you know in 10 years what happened.
You're so right though. Like when we grew up, we had nothing. Like I didn't have a phone yet to be in, but when the streetlights came on, and you know, and like the only reason my mum and dad got us a mobile phone, and it was a Nokia 3310, and it was from Toys R Us, and we got it on Christmas Eve, and then my dad couldn't figure out how to change the ringtone to a Christmas ringtone, right? Because me and my sister were both sleeping in the same bedroom, and the only reason they got it was because of the there was a big murder that happened in Soham, and they were like, "Do you know what? The girls need mobile phones." The people who were murdered, the kids who were murdered, like, there's no way they would have gone, Mum, I think I'm going to get murdered. And ring their mum. Come get me. Yeah, like, come and get me. Like,
and I think that's the fault. I think that's I suppose you have tracking and all that now, so it's a little bit different. But it's still that thing of like, but the first thing they do is take the phone and chuck it in a bush and go. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's literally not protecting them.
No.
Which is scary as a parent. It's really scary. It's terrifying. But the reality is that it's just so against the odds that anyone is going to try and steal it. Like it's not impossible, but it's as close to impossible. You're probably more likely to get struck by lightning, I imagine, than having your child abducted by a complete stranger. Of course, it's going to be like domestic in the main, isn't it? Like it's, you know, random kidnapping. So anyway, so we shall see. That'll be an interesting thing to navigate. But I think in terms of me personally, I like the creativity of it. I like it can be fun to use when you do a visual job, can't it? And it can be quite creative and stuff, which is great. And it definitely, and as well, it can be a really good force for change in a good way, and it can be a really good support. And as long as you're looking at the right things and you're taking in the right stuff, and you're not doing that comparison thing, and you're having healthy habits with it, then I think it can be like really, really good. But yeah,
I agree with you. I think it's like having those boundaries with it, and because we got launched into having it as adults or like late teens, and I think like, it's having those healthy habits now so that we can then teach the next generation, like, you don't need it all the time. And like, I look at my cousins who is turning 20 this year, and she's grown up with tech and now she's barely on it. So it's almost like they're all having that, we're all having the epiphany at the same time. It's just we're all different ages. And I think, it, like you say, it's great for like doing research and like being a visual person. It's great to look at. And I think that's what I get sucked in at. Like, I'm looking at like beautiful pictures. That's essentially
it's literally designed for that, though, isn't it? Like, there's huge amount of research goes into it to make it addictive. Like, it literally is addictive. Like, the fact that the attention span that you have and how long it takes you to like take it in, and it is. I mean, that's completely what it is. It's addictive. Like, they make it addictive. But as long as you're conscious of it and you're able to like manage it, I think
that's it.
It's a great tool.
That's it. I think like as soon as I started to turn that phone off, and actually one thing I did on my personal phone was download Vinted. I don't know if you use Vinted, but then I found myself scrolling and I was like, why am I scrolling Vinted? Like, it's Instagram. This needs to stop. So I caught myself like quite early on, but it was almost like it was just the habit of scrolling. But it definitely has given me time to actually be more creative coming off social media, because then I've got time in the evenings to maybe practice my hands and feet drawing, or like
good idea.
Do some. The art teacher would love it if I'd actually drew a proper foot that didn't look like a club. And to do these creative hobbies that I actually really enjoy anyway. Because I'm not addicted to looking at social media that wasn't really giving me anything.
Well, just doom scrolling, that is like just a waste of time, isn't it? Like, if you're looking for something specifically, or you're just having a quick catch up for 10 minutes, or fine, but it is that the habit of it, when you should be reading a good book, or like you say, drawing feet or something. but I need to get better. That's something. I mean, your idea about having a second phone sounds great.
I mean, like
for emergency contacts only type thing.
It stems from my husband's a truck driver, you see. So if I turned the other phone off, we don't have a house phone anymore. Again,
you'd feel like
So, and it's
can't get hold of it.
It's literally the shittiest phone from Argos, and I think it cost me £8 or £10 a month for a SIM. That is more than enough. And it's like, so my parents can get hold of me, grandparents, his family, and a couple of friends, and that's literally it. Like, it's
I think that's great.
So, and it just means I also put in I've talked about this a little bit on the podcast, but I also put like an out of office on, which I think maybe pinged to you as well, which is like these are my working hours. And that has helped massively, because it only took a couple of goes for people to be like, well, it's 6:30, she's not going to pick it up anyway until the next morning, 8:00 in the morning. So putting those boundaries in just I feel like means that I can rest, be creative and productive in a different way, and then come back to work feeling much fresher than if I'm like answering an email about what plate of turkey's going on at 8:30 at night. Like, I'm not saving the world here. Doesn't matter till the morning, so
well, I was just going to say, I feel like email's the last frontier of like everything else. Someone knows that you read that message, so you feel like you need to instantly reply. Whereas email is the last sort of thing where they're like, they sent them, they might not have read it yet. Maybe they didn't pick up to it. Like it feels safer to not respond immediately. Whereas I think everything else feels like, if it's gone down as red.
Yeah.
I need to like do something.
Urgent. And I think WhatsApp is a right bugger for that as well, because it'll go to like 2 ticks or 2 blue ticks or whatever. And then you're like, why am I looking at this thing at like fucking midnight? I caught myself before I got a personal phone looking on LinkedIn on a Sunday. I was like, why am I looking at this on a Sunday?
Yeah, it's so easily done though.
Oh, massively, massively. I've got one final question for you, and it is a biggie, so answer it however you see fit. But what inspires you, Jo?
What inspires me? Yeah, I think in a very simple answer, I actually think nature inspires me, to be honest. I actually feel like I'm definitely not connected as much as I would like to be, and I need to make more time for it. But so we have near us, we have a place called Hatfield Forest. It's an ancient forest, and when I go there and walk around, I feel like I can feel my nervous system just calm down. Like, it's brilliant. And I do think if you really look at like there is nothing more impressive or beautiful or wonderful than nature, and you see things and you're like, it blows your mind. Like, how is that a thing? You like look at stuff, you know, even a leaf or like something that's like, yeah, but how did that like become like that? It's just, so I do think there's a huge amount of like inspiration to be found just literally in the natural world, for sure. So I think that's something I try to do if I'm having a mental block. Although, to be honest, for me personally, because I have a very fragmented setup where I'm working and then I'm doing something else and then I'm working, I'm doing something else. I actually think I work well like that, by having a break from what I'm doing and then going back, because my brain carries on working out.
Yeah.
I think essentially being creative is problem solving in the sort of in the core of it. You're solving problems and you're coming up with solutions to things, particularly with design, I guess, because the person needs to get this message across and their problem is that it isn't, or their problem is they're not reaching the right people, and you have to fix their problem and make it work for them. So I guess I think like taking breaks
Yeah.
and doing something else, or even working on a different project. You don't have to be like not working and coming back, but nature is definitely definitely somewhere I find inspiration, for sure.
Oh, me too. If I'm feeling a bit like icky, not quite right, I just put my shoes on, drag the dog out. And we've got a nice forest. It's a managed forest, so not as beautiful as your ancient forest, but you can just go and walk out and just be like, oh, finally I can have a breath and just kind of reground and just kind of feel, it's quite hippy dippy of me, but like kind of regrounding and just kind of feeling like you can take a breath, and then all of a sudden the cogs start working and you're like, oh, this idea, that idea, ping, ping, ping. And it's just taking that time to rest. And but same as you walk along and be like, oh, this actually the other day I was walking the dog and it'd been raining and the moss looked so green, you know, that like super bright, almost neon green. And I had this compulsion to touch it and I was like, oh, moss. And then I turned around and there's this guy just looking at me like, she looks a bit weird. And he just like shuffled along, like kept going.
I do. It's funny because I wonder if sometimes I think, oh, is this just a sign that I'm getting old? Because I like the gardening and stuff like that now. But I'll like walk along and I just like, you know, I'll see that's such a beautiful flower, or I don't know, like in someone's garden, or I don't know, maybe it is just you notice it more when you're older and I don't know, maybe you just have a new appreciation of things, of life, of what's important. You know, you go through different things and hardships and stuff, and you actually like learn to appreciate what's actually around you and stuff.
Yeah.
So, it sort of brings it back down as a, like, you are just part of this bigger thing, you know, and actually that makes you feel, you know, your problem's less intense, maybe.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think, I don't know whether it is age, but I got into my gardening probably about 5 years ago, and it was sort of a switch came on like, oh, actually I can live a slower life and still appreciate everything. I don't have to chase the same things that everyone else is chasing. My other half tells me off for stopping and sniffing people's flowers all the time. And then my other friend,
I think they'd be well chuffed. If people are growing flowers in their front garden, they'd be well chuffed that you're taking an interest in them, I bet.
Like, I'm just like, oh, it smells amazing. And he's like, one of these days a bee is going to sting your face. And my other friend, I downloaded a bird identifying app, so that is showing my age as well now. And I actually pulled it out at my friend's wedding. And like, just, oh God. Yeah, that's a whole nother kettle of fish I won't go into. But yeah, I do think you start to slow down and appreciate life. And like you say, you have other life experiences that happen. And then that appreciation comes from those kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? Experiences, I guess. And you just kind of go, it's all right to take a minute and have a little look at someone's flowers and be like, oh, your hydrangeas are a bright blue.
Yeah. I wonder what I made them blue.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you've got to be grateful. I think growing older is a privilege, isn't it, at the end of the day? So I think you've got to like stop and appreciate things.
Yeah,
definitely.
Well, on that note, thank you so much for joining me today. I've thoroughly enjoyed our chat, and I loved your story of your meander into where you got to where you are now, because it's not linear ever, I don't think. No. And that is just proof is in the pudding there. So thank you so much for joining me, Jo.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's been really good fun.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Please rate, follow and share, as it really helps this little podcast out. And if you have found value in the podcast and you have the means to, I do have a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. This will help keep the podcast going. Join me next week for another fantastic guest. Bye!